Смотри экран.
Welcome to the next MiG lesson, in which we'll learn how to navigate Mig-29 with the INS control panel. The Mig-29's navigation system may work autonomous or in conjunction with the RSBN PRMG navigational beacons, widely used in Russia and some other Eastern countries. RSBN serves like a VOR-DME system in the West, while PRMG is a type of ILS but more precise. In RSBN PRMG coordinated mode, the navigation system NS provides flight along the route based on the 3 pre-programmed waypoints and 3 airdrome points, while automatically taking nav fixing from RSBN system. Return to either the home base or one of the 2 directs. Landing approach guidance down to the 50 meters of altitude to any pre-programmed and not programmed airdromes. Missed approach guidance on pre-programmed airdrome. Press spacebar to continue. The main navigation controls are located on a dedicated nav panel. Let's have a closer look at it. Gyro main standby selects the active gyro system. The standby one is used in a case of main gyro failure. 3 lamp buttons, WPAD, in the upper row are used to select the steer point, either WP or ADRO, according to the position of the corresponding switch next on the left of the buttons. Check if a WPAD selector switch is in AD position. Then press the lamp button number 1. The lamp goes lit on the button, and as you may know, the less than 21 display above the buttons goes on also. This lamp always on when the distance to the point is less than 21 miles. Confirm that the dual arrow on the HSI points to the course corresponding to the central point of the airdrome number 1 and distance 33 degrees and 1 nautical mile in our case. Press the second lamp button. Note that a less than 21 display extinguished at the distance to the airdrome number 2 becomes greater than 21 nautical miles. Also, check that the reading on the HSI has changed to the course corresponding to the AD number 2. Press button number 3 and see no action. The said airdrome is not pre-programmed in our case. Now, move the WPAD selector switch to WP position and repeat the checks you made with the AD points, but this time with the waypoints. Consequently, pressing lamp buttons number 1 and 2 confirm that HSI's arrow follows. Finally, leave WP number 1 lamp button pressed and we'll proceed with the next steps. Press spacebar to continue. As it has been already said, the navigation system NS can rely on the RSBN beacon net, providing much more precise navigation. The NS may store up to 3 dedicated beacons, which can be selected by pressing beacons lamp buttons during the flight. Press beacon number 1 lamp button, which in our mission corresponds to the beacon of the takeoff airdrome. In a shot, while the car display, located next below the last 22 lamp, will be activated, indicating that beacon signal is received and nav fixing is available. While in the RSBN mode and the channel auto man switch is in auto position, The car display indicates that aircraft spatial position is being constantly fixed according to RSBN beacon data and position. In our case, to pre-programmed beacon number 1. Note that in a man mode, the active car display indicates reliable azimuth distance data is being received from the non-programmed beacon according to the manually selected channel. Press spacebar to continue. The rail bearing RSBN ADF switch controls which type of a beacon is currently used. On the HSA, there is a dedicated thin greenish arrow tied with the beacon signals. The RSBN beacons provide the bearing from the beacon to the aircraft and a distance. The blunt end of the arrow shows exactly that bearing. So, if you want to find out the direction from your aircraft to the beacon, you have to read the sharp end of the arrow. This is the way the RSBN system works and is used. On the contrary, in ADF mode, the blunt end of the arrow will show the direction from the aircraft to the ADF beacon. That's a classic source of confusion for new pilots. ADF channel selection is available on the ADF control panel. While being working with aerodrome inner and outer beacons as the source, the corresponding switch located just above the radio altimeter is used. Press spacebar to continue. The Reset lamp button, located on the navigation panel, is used to temporarily cancel navigation guidance to the selected WPAD point and redirect navigation toward the pre-programmed beacon. To resume guidance to a WPAD point after pressing reset, the pilot must press the desired WPAD lamp button again. The Compensation 0 lamp button on the panel is used during the visual manual navigation fix routine. It should be pressed at the moment the fix is applied, which resets the previous navigation computations. The Return lamp button enables manual switching from en route navigation to return to base navigation, followed by automatic transition to landing mode. Navigation fixing procedures and the landing mode will be covered later in this lesson. Press spacebar to continue. The course 180, 359, 179 degrees switch, to put it simply, defines which end of the runway will be used in landing approach computations. The circle left-right is used during the missed approach assistance to guide through the left or right landing pattern. Press spacebar to continue. The landing switch forces calculations to provide landing approach guidance to the pre-programmed or not programmed aerodrome. In normal flight with a pre-programmed aerodrome, the landing mode switches on automatically right after the return phase of the flight is completed, and the aircraft has reached the entry point to the landing pattern. At this moment, the autopilot will turn the aircraft to the landing course, no matter in which position the landing switch is. Press spacebar to continue. In the lower part of the panel, there is a pair of rotary drum digit displays with the corresponding knobs. The left concentric knob, named Navigation, consists of the outer dial and an inner knob. The outer dial changes the leftmost digit on the above display and defines the generation type of a beacon. We will not use this dial since DCS operates the same beacon generation across all the maps. The inner knob, however, controls 3 last significant digits on the counter and defines the beacon radio channel. The counter to the right and corresponding knob are used to enter the number of PRMG beacon radio channels, which are used for instrumental landing, typically when a non-programmed aerodrome was chosen to land. The IDEN button is used to transmit special identification code when requested by ATC. Press spacebar to continue. Common notes on manual flight planning. When flying manual navigation routines, when no waypoints have been presented in the navigation system, the pilot prepares a flight plan on the map and has it in the kneeboard. Besides the route, with turning points and usual supplementing data for each turn point on the route, the flight plan contains the RSBN PRMG beacon displacement chart with a special azimuth distance concentric grid. Knowing that in any given position during the flight with the RSBN beacon provided, the pilot would know the azimuth and the distance from the beacon to own plane on HSI and can check it with the map. To comply with the manual flight rules, use the following setup. Channel switch in man position on the nav panel. Navigation counter is set to channel 34. RSBN ADF switch is in RSBN position. Once the correct settings of the particular RSBN beacon are set, the activation of the call light will indicate that the RSBN beacon signal is received and valid. The greenish arrow on the HSI will indicate the azimuth beam of the beacon that has been captured, while the drum distance counter shows the distance. Press spacebar to continue. Common notes on pre-planned flight route navigation. In automatic route navigation, first select either the WP or AD lamp button, then steer the aircraft so that the dual arrow on the HSI points straight up, aligned with the heading notch on the outer ring. This ensures you tracking the correct course. The circular flight direction marker will overlay the center cross on the HUD. Alternatively, you can simply fly the circle on the HUD, keeping it centered. Approaching the next waypoint, at a distance of 6 kilometers, the main arrow on the HSI stabilizes its reading on the current heading scale. Once the aircraft reaches the waypoint, determined by the distance counter 0 readings, just press the lamp button corresponding to the next waypoint. And there you go. Execute a turn with the normal bank angle to the new direction, indicated by the dual arrow. Then proceed keeping the arrow aligned with the heading notch, or fly the circle again. To fly toward an aerodrome as a waypoint, set the WPAD switch to the AD position. Press the lamp button with the number of the desired aerodrome and proceed the usual way as with a waypoint. Press spacebar to continue. Navigation planning and nav panel programming. Do not press any buttons until being explicitly asked. Just read and listen for a while. At any moment on the ground, you can program the flight route. But now, just listen and see my instructions. Okay, let me explain and show some things here. When you open the Mig-29 DTC Manager, you are ready to program those 9 lamp buttons for WP, AD, or beacons. If the DTC was not included in the opened mission, the DTC Manager will start empty. Don't worry, that is the right time to do that with a few clicks. Press spacebar to continue. To begin with, ensure that the Do Not Upload Tab Data checkbox is cleared out. First, on the Points tab, place any number of coordinate points to the map to choose from in the next steps. To do this, press Add button to enable point insertion mode and add desired number of points by clicking on the map. Second, press Edit button and adjust, if needed, the disposition of the points, placing them over the distinctive landscape objects, river turns, towns, crossroad, or even over the existing positions of RSBN ADF beacons. Distinctive objects are preferable in planning for the cases when beacon signals are unreachable or the nav computer fails. Press spacebar to continue. Click on the Waypoints tab. Below the spreadsheet, you can find a combo box filled with your coordinate points you've just created. Select one of them, then press the Add button next to the combo box, and it will be added as the first waypoint. Repeat adding for the second and the third waypoint slots. These points added to the spreadsheet will correspond to 1 through 3 waypoint buttons on the nav panel when WPAD switch is set to WP mode. Press spacebar to continue. Once all 3 waypoint slots in the DTC are set, switch to the Airdrome tab and populate all 3 slots with airbase names from the combo box, following the same procedure used for waypoints, this time selecting from the list of available airbases. At any point you can delete or reorder entries in the spreadsheet using the red basket icons for deletion or the light blue arrows for reordering, located on the right side of the spreadsheet. Note, in addition to selecting an airbase name, you may also assign a previously created coordinate point from the corresponding combo box, which is also processed. Internally, both airdromes and waypoints are stored as simple coordinate pairs, physically identical. The distinction between them is logical, meaning any AD button can be used as a waypoint during long-haul flights. If the selected airdrome in the drop-down list is equipped with a stationary or mobile RSB and PRMG beacon group, the fields above the spreadsheet will automatically populate with its parameters. But in the case of PRMG, the channel must be typed manually. Press spacebar to continue. The last category of nav points in the nav computer, the beacons, are programmed under the RSBN tab. You can add any of the existing mobile RSBN beacons or an airdrome which is equipped with the RSBN. Simple nav points can also be added from the list. In this case, the appropriate lamp button on the nav panel will be used as the usual waypoint for navigation. Note that some airdromes on the map might be pre-equipped with RSBN PRMG beacons from scratch, but you can always add a mobile RSBN PRMG group to any point in the mission editor. If a mobile group is added within the perimeter of the airfield, the corresponding airdrome becomes visible as equipped with these beacons in the DTC lists. Press spacebar to continue. The Route tab. You can use it to plan the route, input altitude and speed data to have the ETA on each point. Any data inserted to DTC spreadsheets have an immediate effect. Once the window is closed by escape or top right cross, the nav computer in the cockpit will be found programmed. In any case, if you want to save the entered data for future use, select the File menu option from the top of the window. Press spacebar to continue. If the mission file has come with the pre-programmed nav data, the DTC manager will load them automatically, thus giving the ability to check which data has been set for each nav lamp button in the cockpit. Let's do it now with the data provided for our lesson. You can change contents to get acquainted, but do not forget to restore the initial data using the load button before rushing back into the cockpit. Failing to do so will alter the workflow of the lesson and lead to unpredictable results. Okay, now it's time to press right Ctrl plus right Shift plus K to open the DTC manager. Get acquainted, then press Escape to jump back into the seat. Again, don't forget to load back the initial data if you did any changes for testing. Once in the cockpit, press the Master Caution button just to trigger the practical part of the lesson to begin. So, we are back in the seat. Nice. Check if the weapons control system mode selector knob is set to the nav position, in order the nav data to be provided on the HUD after takeoff. Check the controls on the nav panel. Gyro switch in main position. Channel switch in auto. WP-AD switch in WP position. RSBN ADF switch in RSBN position. Both number 1 lamp buttons are activated in WP-AD and beacons rows. Course switch position corresponds to a proper takeoff sector, 179 degrees. Cycle switch corresponds to the left-hand flight pattern rules with the tower control. Landing switch in off position. Check if barometric altimeter reading is zeroed to correspond to the airfield ground pressure level, and proceed with the taxi to runway 4 and rush into the air.
Один, 3, 0. Таймыр. Разрешаю руление на полосу 4. Один, 3, 0. Взлет запрещаю. 1, 3, 0. Таймыр. Взлет по готовности. Отход по схеме. На 300 по давлению. 7, 4, 8. Запятая 3, 8.
Retract the gear G and flaps F.
Смотри экран.
The HUD starts to indicate navigation data once the gear is fully retracted. You will see the singular flight direction marker and distance to the nav point. Note that the flight direction marker shows the direction you must steer to and does not provide any altitude reference, so it is always vertically centered during the route navigation. Climb to the altitude of 5,000 feet, maintaining 10 degrees pitch and speed around 400 knots. When the distance counter reading reaches 0 or starts to increase, the first waypoint is reached. It's the right time to select the next waypoint lamp button on the nav panel. Turn to the direction of the circle on the HUD. Check the arrow on HSI. Steer with the stick so it's pointing up, adjusted with the heading notch of the ring. Proceed with the flight to get 5,000 feet of altitude at 400 knots. Now, it's time to learn the visual nav fixing procedures and get the basic experience with it in case it happens in future. First, turn off the radio navigation aids. Switch off the currently activated lamp button in the beacons row. As you may notice, the car display extinguishes. This clearly indicates that the aircraft is no longer receiving radio beacon signals required for navigation corrections. In this condition, the system switched to fully inertial mode, which is susceptible to sensor drift and accumulates position error over time, especially during flight legs without external fixes. In severe cases, the accumulated error may become so large that continuing the mission is impossible due to complete disorientation. To maintain optimal tactical navigation accuracy, fixes should be performed every 40-60 minutes during autonomous flight. For long-haul operations, the interval may be extended, but should not exceed maintain 5,000 feet of altitude and 400 knots. The principle of visual fixing is simple. You fly over the geographical object with precisely known coordinates and fix the navigation system. In MiG-29, you fulfill this by flying over one of the waypoints with pre-programmed coordinates and pressing the Comp 0 lamp button exactly over the place. The more precise you do this, the more reliable the fix will be. Our visual fix point will be located at waypoint 2, about the river mouth south to Krasnodar, which itself is a good visual ground object. Maintain 5,000 feet of altitude and 400 knots. Keep the HSI arrow pointed up and adjusted with the heading notch on the rim. Keep the HSI arrow pointed up and adjusted with the heading notch on the rim. Maintain 5,000 feet of altitude and 400 knots. Maintain 5,000 feet of altitude and 400 knots. Maintain 5,000 feet of altitude and 400 knots. Keep the HSI arrow pointed up and adjust it with the heading notch on the rim. Maintain 5,000 feet of altitude and 400 knots. When approaching the Krasnodar city, the largest settlement in the region, locate the mouth of the river flowing into the Krasnodar reservoir. This is our visual reference point corresponding with the coordinates stored in waypoint number 2 slot of navigation computer. Steer the aircraft with the stick to fly exactly over the mouse point. At the moment you are right about the selected visual point, engage Comp 0 lamp button on the panel by pressing keyboard button 9. The fix is accomplished after that. Nav data is recalculated and you can confirm that the distance counter dropped its reading to 0. Once the accumulated error in nav system has been eliminated, the pilot is ensured that normally he has safe 30-40 minutes of further autonomous flying without excessive drift in navigation, and he may select the next waypoint to fly to. In this lesson, the waypoint number 2 was the last in a short route flight. We are ready to head home and learn return procedures. Let's contact the ATC and request RTB from the MyCop tower. First, select the second radio channel on the radio panel located to your left. Press right alt plus backslash to communicate with the ATC. Then navigate to F5, ATC, select MyCop Hanska. F1, return to base. Upon listening to the weather report and landing conditions, hide the radio menu by pressing F12. Then, set the reported parametric pressure on the altimeter. Press the spacebar once the altimeter is set.
Сократ,
130. Возврат.
1-3-0. Сократ. Следуйте курсом 1-2-9. Удаление 8-0. Давление 7-3-4,5-2. Посадочный 0-4. Занимайте высоту круга.
Confirm that the course selector on the nav panel is positioned in the correct landing sector, 0 to 179 degrees, corresponding to the runway 4 of Mig-29A Air Base, and press the return lamp button after that. In return mode, the nav computer ignores the position of the WPAD switch and always takes data from the airdrome memory slots. By default, the computer selects slot number 1, which corresponds to our takeoff airdrome, Krimsk. But in our lesson, we will land in another airdrome. Press the WPAD button 2 to select the second airdrome in memory. This will be Maykop Hanska. Select the appropriate beacons of Maykop by pressing lamp button number 2 in beacons button row. On the ADF control panel, select the frequency channel number 2, the beacon in Maykop transmit zone. Fly the circle on the HUD, indicating the return direction. Alternatively, you can follow the needle on the HSI, keeping it straight up against the heading notch on the rig. Maintain 5,000 feet of altitude and 400 knots. set the flight horizontal, and I will turn on the active poles for some important instructions you have to know. The return mode provides the pilot with all necessary indications to descend and steer the aircraft vertically and horizontally all the way down to landing pattern altitude of 2,000 feet and heading aligned with landing curves to enter the landing glide slope. Press spacebar to continue. The normal angle of descent trajectory is 7 degrees, which means that from altitude let's say 42,500 feet, the descent must be started at a distance of 57 nautical miles from the pattern entry point, which located 9 nautical miles of the runway center point within the glide slope. In our case, we fly at 5,000 feet above the ground, so our task is easier. Fly level until the aircraft catches the glide slope trajectory at some point, the ADI horizontal director center. Until that happens, the horizontal director bar on ADI will be stuck in upper position, effectively indicating the glide slope trajectory goes above. Press spacebar to continue. The director bar on the ADI will begin moving toward the center of the indicator when the aircraft enters the glide path groove, defined as plus minus 1,800 feet above or below the glide slope. In our case, the aircraft enters the glide slope from below, so the bar will begin to move downward. Once this movement is observed, reduce airspeed to 500 km per hour. When the director bar reaches the central circle on the ADI, we are in the groove. Initiate descent at a 7 degrees angle, as previously instructed. Press spacebar to continue. Maintain the ADI director bar centered while continuously monitoring airspeed 270 knots and altitude descent. Level the aircraft at 2,000 feet. This marks the landing pattern plateau. At this point, you'll be approximately 10 kilometers from the center of the maneuvering stack circle, which has a 5 kilometers radius. With a standard 30 degrees bank angle, you'll be guided to enter the stack tangentially to ensure proper alignment for the approach. Press spacebar to continue. After entering the stack circle, the navigation computer will guide the aircraft through the 30 degrees bank maneuver until it intercepts the final approach course. If all parameters are within limits, the landing approach mode will engage automatically. However, if the aircraft fails to enter the stack circle within the required 5 kilometers radius, the automatic transition to landing mode will not occur. In this case, the pilot must manually fly the aircraft using the HSI needle to navigate toward the estimated entry point. The landing mode in this case will only activate if the aircraft is within 8 kilometers of the runway center. Press spacebar to continue. The automatic landing mode will engage if the aircraft meets all of the following conditions. It is within plus minus 0.8 nautical miles of the runway center line. The difference between the aircraft heading and the landing course is less than 60 degrees. Flight altitude is below 3,690 feet. Distance to the runway center point is between 4.3 and 19 nautical miles. At this moment, both GS and VL failure flags on the HSI disappear. The HUD displays Russian K and Cyrillic G symbol that looks like an inverted L for VL markers. The HSI course arrow aligns with the true landing course. The HSI small needle switches from RSBM to indicate the outer NDB bearing. The vertical director bar on the HSI and the flight direction circle on the HUD indicate steering commands to maintain alignment and center line tracking. The ADI horizontal position pointer mirrors the HSI course director bar. The ADI vertical position pointer shows deviation from the 600 meters plateau altitude prior to glide slope entry, and then mirrors the HSI glide slope indicator once established. Press spacebar to continue. When the landing mode is engaged and the aircraft is banking to the landing course, it is necessary to access the rate the small needle on the HSI closest to the main arrow and make a relevant manual adjustment with the stick. The aim is to set the turn rate so that at the end of the turn, both arrows are aligned vertically against the heading notch on the rim. When at the landing heading, slow down to 260 knots and push the landing gear lever down. Press spacebar to continue. Once the horizontal and vertical director bars are centered, establish the descent rate about 700 to 1200 feet per meter. Keep the bars centered, making gentle adjustment by the stick. Fly the circle on the HUD or HSI's arrows, aligned and up. Normally, while within the glide slope groove control the speed with the longitudinal stick movements, the position on the glide slope with the throttles. Keep the following rates until touchdown. Altitude 1,300 feet. Speed 194 to 200. Outer beacon path. Speed 172 to 178. Inner beacon path. Speed 162 to 167. Flare at 150 to 155 knots. Touchdown at 135 to 140 knots, with the AOA around 11 degrees. Press spacebar to continue. Note that automatic return mode can be as only with pre-programmed aerodromes and active RSBN beacons. This mode can be enabled on any distance from the aerodrome within the walking area of one of the pre-programmed RSBN beacons. Prepare to take control of the aircraft and press spacebar when ready. Steer the aircraft so that HSI course angle aligns with the heading notch on the rim of the indicator. Maintain 5,000 feet of altitude and 400 knots. Note that ADI director bar starts to move downwards. It's time to begin descending. Level the aircraft and slow down to 270 knots and wait until we catch the glide slope. HSI glide slope director at the center. Push the stick forward to nose down a bit to get the aircraft descent at 2,900 to 5,900 feet per meter, keeping the glide slope director within the center. Deploy air brakes B if speed is too high. Be prepared to bank left sharply at 30 degrees to enter the final approach, when the HSI course arrow suddenly turns into be aligned with the runway true course. Do not accelerate the turn. Avoid oversteer. Keep the turn at 30 degrees bank. It will make a deal and you will have the arrow straight up at the notch exactly when your aircraft is aligned with the runway direction, and the landing mode will be engaged automatically. Observe the GS and VL markers on the HUD. Keep the HUD circle marker centered. Watch the directors on ADI centered. Wait until stack circle maneuver is completed, watching the curse arrow and smaller needle collinear. You are on the final now. Proceed deaccelerating. Gear down G at 215 to 220 knots. Landing flaps down F.
Выпусти шасси.
Control the speed with the longitudinal stick movements, the position on the glide slope with the throttles. Note that altitude 1,300 feet, speed 194 to 200. Outer beacon passed 172 to 178. Inner beacon passed 162 to 167.
Работайте с посадкой. 130. Сократ, проверьте выпуск шасси. Ветер у земли 058, скорость 4.
It's time to learn the missed approach mode. Wave off, power, power, pull up, gaining the altitude at 8 to 10 pitch angle. Gear G and flaps up F. Speed 270. Press the missed approach button, left Alt +6 on the AFCS control panel in the left forward corner of the cockpit.
130. Посадку запрещаю, уходите на второй круг.
At 600 feet, turn left with 30 degrees bank angle to lay down on the reversed course. Gain 2000 feet of altitude while in turn. Maintain speed 270 knots. Follow the HSI course arrow, keeping it aligned with the notch. Follow the directors and altimeter readings to stay within the path and at 2000 feet. The Nav 8 will guide you to the tangent of the 5-kilometer stack circle. You must be about 70 to 19 kilometers from the airdrome. At this moment, the signal lamp on the AFCS missed approach button extinguishes and navigation return mode activates. From this point on, all the procedures would be the same as you've already learned in the previous steps. Follow the needles and wait until they jerk into the direction of the final approach. Again, follow the aids until auto landing mode engages. and flaps down, F. Speed 215 to 200.
Выпусти шасси.
Control the speed with the longitudinal stick movements. The position on the glide slope with the throttles. Note that altitude 1,300 feet, speed 194 to 200. Outer beacon past 172 to 178. Inner beacon past 162 to 167.
Сократ, проверьте выпуск шасси. Ветер у земли 0,58, скорость 4 метра в секунду. Посадочный 0,4.
After the inner marker, make final adjustments to land on the aiming point, often visible as black tire marks, situated 150 to 200 feet past the runway threshold. Flare at 150 to 155 knots. Touchdown at 135 to 140 knots, with the AOA around 11 degrees. Deploy the chute P once both main wheels are on the concrete and rolling. The lesson is over. Press escape for exit.
1-3-0. Заруливайте на стоянку.